Vrishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Jayatam Shuruto Pangor Mama Manda Mater Gati Matsarvasva Padam Bojo Radha Madana Mohano Divyad Vrindaranya Kalpadrumadha Shimad Ratanagar Singhasanasto Shimad Radha Shila Govinda Devo Prishtalibi Sevyamano Smarami Shiman Rasarasarambi Vamshivata Tatakstitaha Karshan Venu Sanair Gopir Gopinata Shriyestuna Bhaktya Vihina Aparadha Lakshay Kshiptas Chakamadi Taranga Madhye Kripa Mai Tvam Sharanam Prapanna Vrinde Numaste Charanarindam Panchatattvatmakam Krishnam Bhakta Rupa Swarupakam Bhakta Avataram Bhaktakyam Namami Bhakta Shaktikam Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasadi Gaur Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. I offer my unlimited Dandavat Pranams and my Shraddha Pushpanjali at the lotus feet of my most worshipable beloved Gurudev Nitya Lila Pravishta Om Vishnu Pad Paramahansa Asto Tarasata Sri Srila A.C. Bhakti Vedanta Swami Maharaj Srila Prabhupada. Then I offer my same unlimited Dandavat Pranams and my Shraddha Pushpanjali at the lotus feet of my most worshipable beloved Siksha Gurudevs Nitya Lila Pravishta Om Vishnu Pad Paramahansa Astatarasata Sri Srila Bhakti Rakshak Sridhar Goswami Maharaj and Nitya Lila Pravishta Om Vishnu Pad Paramahansa Asto Tarasata Sri Srila Bhakti Vedanta Narayan Goswami Maharaj. My Dandavat Pranams to the lotus feet of all of my Shri Shri Rupa Nuga Guru Varga and my Dandavat Pranams to all of the Vaishnavas and all of the Vaishnavis. So we're going to complete our Upadesha Avali of Srila Vaishnav Sarvabhauma Jagannath Das Babaji Maharaj. Just to review a couple. The duty of all householders is to accept the shelter of the lotus feet of Sadhguru and to engage in the service of Sri Giridhari. Those two things. What two things?
Accept the shelter of Sadhguru and engage in the service of Sri Giridhari.
Interesting that he's telling here, engage in the service of Sri Giridhari. What does that mean? Who is Giridhari?
Lifter of Govardhana.
What?
The lifter of Govardhana.
That's right. Giri Bharadhari. Giridhari. Gurudev named his mat in Govardhan Giridhari Gauriya Mat. Giridhari Gauriya Mat. This is actually a very intimate seva. To engage in the service of Giridhari, I see in many different ways I see it, but especially to follow the path of Rupa and Raghunath Goswamis. This is what a householder must do. Householder is not a bad position at all. Not a bad position at all. What is the virtue of being a household Vaishnava, Grihastha Vaishnava? It's actually a very high position. A Grihastha Vaishnava. What is the virtue of that?
Well, it's an ashram.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a place for
Mike?
making spiritual advancement. Because it's an ashram, it's a place for making spiritual advancement. It's an order of life where one can make spiritual advancement. But just as when one engages in sadhana bhakti, one engages with a purpose that one wants to enter into bhav. So also the progress for grihastas, that his aspiration is something beyond just that ashram into vanaprastha, at least.
Yeah. Do we have many examples from all of our Vedic literatures, Chaitanya Charitamrita, Chaitanya Bhagavat, Srimad Bhagavatam? Do we have many examples of Grihastha Vaishnavas?
Yudhishthira Maharaj,
Srivas Thakur, Yudhishthira Maharaj.
More than half the Mahajans.
More than half. You've counted?
I think it was like 7 or 8 of them.
Oh, of the Mahajans. Mm-hmm. Okay. Yes, that's true. How many do we have? How many examples?
Chaitanya Maharaj.
Yes. Himself. What about Krishna? Huh? In his form as Brajendra Nandan Shyamasundar, he did not enter the Grihastha ashram. So he's eternally not entering the Grihastha ashram. But we have seen that, yes, the gopis have chanted a certain mantra in order to cross over the Yamuna River. When they got to the other side and they visited Durvasa Rishi, then after feeding him sumptuously, right, then, which one was it? No, it was Krishna told the gopis. Was it Krishna told the gopis
First.
to tell Durvasa Rishi that Krishna is a brahmachari, right? Krishna told that, right?
Yes.
That's right. And then after that, when they were coming back, Durvasa Rishi told the gopis to tell to Krishna that what?
He never eats.
Yes. Durvasa Rishi never, he's always fasting, he doesn't eat. But what was the inner meaning of this?
No enjoying wood.
Krishna's engaged with himself, basically. So he's the absolute truth, and his shaktis are connected to him, his shakti line.
Yeah.
So it's no question of him going outside.
Outside of what?
Outside for connecting with another, because he's in a sense just connecting with himself.
Well, brahmachari is the opposite of lust, is it not? In one sense. Because what is the meaning of the word brahmachari?
Does it mean both Brahman and Acharya?
No, not Acharya.
No? No.
No, Brahmachari, Achari. It means one who is going towards Brahma. One whose very existence is for the purpose of pursuing the absolute truth and attaining one's relationship, sambandha, abhideya, prayojana. That person is a brahmachari who is only doing that, nothing else. Right? So, we have heard the term before, the Grihastha Brahmachari, from our Srila A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. He told his disciples, you should be Grihastha Brahmacharis. What does that mean? What is a Grihastha Brahmachari? Who can truly be called a Brahmachari in the Grihastha ashram?
I was going to say that the external and internal. To be externally Grihastha, engaged in that ashram, and internally Brahmachari, the mind completely focused on serving Hari Guru Vaishnavas.
Yeah, but that leaves a lot of speculation.
I mean,
Let Braj do.
One whose only purpose is to engage in Krishna consciousness and to help one another to do the same.
You mean one another means husband and wife you're talking about?
but Prabhupada did very specifically say that he
Mhm.
wanted his brahmachari grihastas to be celibate.
Right.
And only for the purpose of creating a child, and with the samskar, Garbhadan samskar, chanting 50 rounds previous.
Yeah, like.
So, I mean, that was his specific instructions on how to be a brahmachari grihasta.
Yeah, he did. He gave such specific instructions. Quite specific. Did you want to add anything to that? Yeah. Grihastha Brahmachari. So, one thing is that there's only two instructions he gave here. The duty of all householders is to accept the shelter of the lotus feet of Sadguru and engage in the service of Sri Giridhari. So, relationship with Sadguru is the very foundation of Grihastha life. No possibility of being actual Grihastha unless one has accepted the shelter of the lotus feet of Sri Guru. Why? Why? Why does that act of accepting the lotus feet of Sri Guru as one's shelter enable one to be a real Grihastha?
Because there's no question of progress. No question of progress unless one is under the instructions of a sadguru.
Well, what if someone hasn't accepted initiation from Sadguru, but they are trying to pursue the instructions that they've heard that Sadgurus give, trying to chant the holy names and be regulated and all of that? What about that?
Well, I would think that it's better that Sadguru becomes the head of the household rather than either the husband or wife. So without having Sri Guru as the head of the household, then how is it a spiritual ashram?
Well, we see that Chaitanya Mahaprabhu lived in Grihastha ashram for 24 years. But for some of that time period, He had not yet taken Diksha, initiation. He had not yet taken from Sri Ishwara Puripad for, I don't know exactly how many years.
When his father passed away, he was a teenager.
That's right. He was a teenager. I don't know the exact age though. But perhaps he was 15, 16, I can say, I'm not sure. I'd like to know if there's some documentation of that. What about our Srila Prabhupada? What about his situation? When he first met Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur was in 1921, right? 22. And at that time, what was his age? About 26 years old, I think, right?
26.
Yeah. And he had already entered Grihastha ashram. I mean, yeah, he was a married man.
Right, he had just entered, like...
Well, he had already...
21. Oh yeah, he had just entered.
Oh, in 21 he was married.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. Right, so... so then at that age of 25, so then, no, we just said 26, right? That's when he met Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati. Shri Shri Guru Gauranga Gandharvika Giridhari Radha Govinda Jiyo Ki Jai. When did he actually get formally initiated?
1933.
Right. Which is how many years later?
10 years, or 11 years. Maybe.
Yeah, 11 years. So how do we understand that such a personality who later became the world Acharya, that he didn't accept initiation, because here it says, accept the shelter of the lotus feet of Sri Guru.
But didn't he do that right when he first met? When he first met Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, wasn't there an acceptance in his heart of him?
Yeah, that's actually the number one main point. I have audios of Prabhupada telling the story. And he was so impressed, because he grew up in a Vaishnava family, and his father was always inviting so many different sadhus, right, to come. He would ask all of them, bless my son. He would specifically ask them, bless my son that he'll become a great devotee of Srimati Radharani, right? So his background was full of tremendous samskaras in the line of bhakti, right? Not only that, but he had also studied the Mahaprabhu's life and so forth. He was not unaware of who Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is and so forth. But yet, he had a certain mindset, and he expressed that to Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur as soon as they met. And it was actually kind of a doubt that he expressed to him about the efficacy of preaching Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's movement without, first of all, having the prestigious position in India of being an independent country. So first we have to do that. And then Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, he answered in such a way that it completely cleared any of his doubts or misgivings. That, I mean, he was almost like saying, what is the use of preaching? That was like Srila Prabhupada was saying to his Prabhupada. It's almost like he was saying that, like a challenge. Like, how can we do that? You're telling us, young, Indian students, that we should preach the message of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. We're educated and so forth. But look where we are. In the eyes of the rest of the world, We're like this beggar country, you know, dependent politically, even economically. We're completely controlled by a foreign power. We don't even have our own independence. We have to get that back. That was the freedom movement of that time. Very, very strong. We have to get that position back. For centuries, for thousands, for lakhs of years, we've been an independent nation and world powerful. But now we've become like this. So first we have to get that back, and then we can preach this message. But because otherwise, who will listen to us? Huh? Who will listen to us? So Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, he basically told, it would be great if we actually had a recording of exactly what he told, but he told in such a way that there can be no doubt about it, that Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's movement is completely transcendental to any outward situation of this material world. It is the highest necessity of every living entity. It must be taken up and preached, especially by the Indians. This is their bounden duty that Chaitanya Mahaprabhu himself told. Bharata bhumite manushya hoila janmajar, janmasarta kori korapara upakar. Do good for the whole world. Today I was listening to an audio of Prabhupada. It's the same audio. I've been listening to it the last few times. It's very long. It's like more than 2 hours. And it's labeled as the first recorded lecture of Srila Prabhupada in 1966, around April. First recorded lecture. Prabhupada's in his little office room that he was renting. You know. And so Prabhupada was making this point to his tiny little audience, that my heart is actually in Vrindavan. This is such a way that he built up to. He's basically talking about how you have a gross and a subtle body, and you don't die and your subtle body carries you to the next gross body. And he's telling all of this because it's from the 7th to the 11th or 12th verse of the 2nd chapter of Bhagavad Gita. That's what the topic is. He's reading that. But he's telling there that it depends where your mind is, because he's talking about how the mind brings you from one body to the next. And he's giving a few different examples of that. Then in the course of that, he says, actually, my mind, I am always feeling separation from my Vrindavan. That is my home, Vrindavan. But I am undergoing so much inconvenience here, feeling so much I want to be there. But I have accepted this as my duty because it is the order of my spiritual master that I should bring this message to you here in New York City, biggest prestigious city of the whole world. That's why I have come. Prabhupada, you know, they could not understand who he really is, but he's trying to let them know that this message is the most important thing for every human being on the planet. You see? So, Srila Prabhupada also was a grihasta, and he could not immediately engage in following the instruction of Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur and follow him, because he was now in married life, and he felt, how can I leave? We also have many audios of Prabhupada talking about that. And it took another 30 years, was it? 30 years? From 1921, 36, and then 46, 56, 60, yeah, 30 years. The Gurudev used to say, Swamiji, he took 30 years to complete following the instruction, but I have only taken 20 years. You know? So, anyway, Prabhupada, the criterion of his accepting the shelter of Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, it came about from the first moment. Because he was so impressed. He was so impressed. He said, I was always thinking about him. At first he was admitting, he was saying, here is the person. Here is the person who will bring this to the whole world, in whose hands this movement of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, it will go everywhere. Here is the person. And he kept on thinking, I've met such a saintly person I have met. And he began thinking about him all the time. Yeah. But in the course of his Grihastha duties, he even relocated to Allahabad, and which was with Prayag, so forth. So many things happening in his life. But always I was thinking of him. I have met such a saintly person. Then Prabhupada said, actually I was initiated by him. Yes, because it means real acceptance. Real acceptance. So that's what Srila Jagannath Das Babaji Maharaj is telling here, that the duty of all householders is to accept the shelter of the lotus feet of Sadguru and engage in the service of Sri Giridhari. That means to actually follow the path of Rupa and Raghunath Goswami, 6 Goswamis, and to follow the instructions that Rupa Goswami has given in his Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, how to perform Bhakti Yoga, everything. So it's a very simple instruction, but within that instruction is the complete requirements of being a Grihastha Brahmachari, because a Brahmachari is not enjoying senses. His senses are completely controlled. He is celibate. We know that the word brahmachari means celibate, but actually it's beyond just that. Brahmacharya means to be completely dedicated, 100%, one focus, to go towards Brahmachari, to proceed towards the absolute truth, Brahma, which is Krishna, Parabrahma. Yeah.
So I couldn't immediately execute the order of my Gurudev, but I never stopped thinking about it for a moment.
Yeah, he couldn't immediately do it, but in actuality, he was worshipping him.
He was making magazines.
Well, that happened a little after. I don't think he made any of those magazines before
44.
In 1944, but 1936 he was given the instruction to print books like that before, just before, 2 weeks before, in actuality. He received the letter 2 weeks before the disappearance of Prabhupada. So he pursued that. That instruction of his spiritual master became his life and soul. That's why he always used to refer to that purport of Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur in his Bhagavad Gita, Vyavasayatmika buddhi ekeha kurunandana. You know, because one pointed. And he was chanting 1 lakh. We know that. We've heard that from Mula Prakriti's book from various persons. They knew what kind of sadhana he was doing, especially towards the end, in the last final years, when he was living in Calcutta. Srila Sridhar Maharaj was coming, going. But the thing is that to engage in the service of Giridhari, Krishna, is the life of a Grihastha, under the direction and shelter of Sri Guru. There is no other meaning to the Grihastha ashram than that. And if someone is not focused on that, they're not a Grihastha. technically they're not a grihastha. What are they? Yes, grihamedhi. Grihamedhi. Medhi means your intelligence is all completely absorbed in griha. Srila Gurudev Maharaj was quite a perfect example of a grihastha Vaishnava. He very responsibly performed his occupational duty of a headmaster of a school, a teacher, but he was very, very strict in his own personal sadhana. And he was a little bit before he turned the age of 50, and he still hadn't taken initiation. But what? He left home. He renounced. And went to search for his guru. Searched high and low, north and south, east, west. Finally ended up in Vrindavan, where he got a Back to Godhead magazine and met Srila Prabhupada face to face. And from the moment that they met, Srila Prabhupada asked him, have you taken sannyas yet? Because he was wearing saffron probably. And he said no, and then Prabhupada said, I will give you sannyas. You can imagine. So Sadguru and Satsishya, it's not only the outward acceptance of initiation, but nowadays most devotees, they outwardly accept. But inwardly they want to be independent and enjoy their senses. Sure, there is sense enjoyment in the Grihastha ashram, but for the service of Krishna. That's the thing. So Gaur Govinda Maharaj, I know one story, he had 6 children, he fathered 6 children, and he said that he only engaged in intercourse 6 times in his whole life and produced those 6 children. Can you imagine? So there was no frivolous sense enjoyment. Can most of the householder devotees even touch that? But they are showing the example. So we can't cheat Krishna and Guru. We can't, pose as if we are actually devoted without truly being devoted. But there's happiness and there's also distress in each ashram. That's unavoidable. See? So there's a certain kind of happiness that comes for the grihasthas in the grihastha ashram, which is lawful according to the Vedas, that they're enjoying the very charming activities of their little children. Gives great joy in grihastha ashram. The broken words of the children and all of this is also described by Prahlad Maharaj. When he's telling the prayer to Lord Nrsingadev and saying, how can one leave the relationship? Then he's describing how the intimate meeting of husband and wife and the children and all, how could one leave this? But anyway, that's the end of our class today on this one instruction. I don't know why I just got into this one. There's more to come.
What's the one number 20?
Well, this one, we stopped yesterday at number 19, and today we went back to number 16 when we were starting to review. But that's how these are, because they're so full of deep contemplation. Otherwise, how are we going to remember them? Now after this class, I'll remember that one. I don't know about you, but that makes me remember his exact words, that there's 2 instructions. That's what a grihastha must do. Then he can actually be called a grihastha Vaishnava. Gaur Premanandi. Vancha kalpatarubhascha kripa sindhu bhya eva cha patitanam pavanebhyo vaishnavebhyo namo.